Let's go to the US, where there are more attacks on the Robert Mueller investigation into Trump's collusion with Russia in the presidential campaign. The team working for Mueller have gained access to tens of thousands of emails sent and received by people on Donald Trump's transition team, and the allegation is that these have been obtained illegally. It's coming from Trump supporters. Let's go to Washington and to our correspondent there, Simon Marks. Good morning to you, Simon. Let's just start with exactly what Robert Mueller's team have got and then move to how they got them.
Absolutely. It's a bit complicated, this Guyon, because it involves several branches of the US government. Robert Mueller's investigative team, which of course is digging into ties that may have existed between the Trump campaign and the Russians last year, but also now digging into broader issues, including possible obstruction of justice by President Trump when he fired the FBI director, James Comey, earlier in the year. And it's now claimed by a lawyer for the transition team that Donald Trump appointed after he won the presidential election, but before he was sworn in as president, that the Mueller investigative team gained access to thousands of emails and telephone records and other documents relating to the transition efforts that were underway in those months after Donald Trump won the election last November, but before he was sworn into office at the inauguration in January. Those documents and email records were provided to the Mueller investigation by something called the General Services Administration, the GSA. It is the branch of the U.S. government that helps any incoming president, among other things, to set up a transition team, and it provides them with the government computers and the technology and the telephone lines that they use to create the incoming presidential administration. Essentially, President Trump's transition team lawyer is saying that the GSA had no legal right to hand documents over to the Mueller investigation. He's claiming that all of this is illegal and that the Mueller team is trafficking in data that it should never have been given access to. But the Mueller team is saying that's not the case, and the GSA is saying that's not the case. Indeed, the GSA says that the Trump transition team was specifically warned that no documentation should be or would be considered private once it started passing through GSA channels. So this is a big row. It's part of a relentless series of attacks by Republicans on Robert Mueller's investigation. And presumably, if the Trump transition team chooses, it's going to end up in the courts.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask that. So they are potentially looking at that avenue. Could it be read as one of a moves to try to destabilise the investigation, or even as speculated, Donald Trump even moving to remove Mueller?
Well, I mean, I think there's no question about it. That is once again in the air. We've seen in the last few days a whole series of attacks by Trump loyalists on Robert Mueller's investigation. Kellyanne Conway, the president's counselor, on Fox News yesterday was claiming that Robert Mueller is orchestrating a plot, a coup, she described it, against the U.S. government led by President Donald Trump. We've seen the Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, who's very close to President Trump, take to the airwaves here within the last few hours and insist that Robert Mueller's investigation needs to be wrapped up very quickly. It's a relentless distraction and an unnecessary distraction, he said on TV here within the last couple of hours. At the end of the day, though, the question remains, will Donald Trump be politically courageous enough to take a move firing Robert Mueller and derailing his investigation that the Deputy Attorney General, for whom Robert Mueller works, to whom he reports, insists is not guilty of any kind of improprietary behavior whatsoever? And will Donald Trump be willing to risk the enormous amount of criticism that the firing of Robert Mueller would entail? Senior Republicans up on Capitol Hill, including Senator Lindsey Graham, have argued in the past that the firing of Robert Mueller would be the beginning of the end of the Trump presidency. But certainly the White House appears to be launching a lot of trial balloons at the moment to see whether anyone's opinion over the last few months has shifted.
Thanks very much, Simon. That's Simon Marks from Washington.